Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Workplace Wanderer Lessons from the Expert. Well, it's a new year. This is the first podcast recording for 2025. We took a little break, and because there were some decisions that were being made to revamp the pod a little bit. And I was doing a lot of thinking of how we can make this podcast better. And I realized there was one person I kept following on social media and watching her share her perspective. And then we have actually had her on the podcast once before to discuss the conversations we have at work. And, as I continued to follow her, I just was continually impressed and realizing that we shared a lot of similar beliefs, a lot of different beliefs, and that I wanted to take a leap of faith and ask if she'd be willing to host this podcast with me. So everybody, please welcome the new host of the Workplace Wanderer podcast, Kara Kirby.
Hi, this is so fun. We're going to have so much fun doing this. Thank you, Blake.
Of course. Yeah, I think we have a good banter back and forth. I think I appreciate your willingness to sort of challenge a lot of what's out there that exist in the leadership development and workforce development and organizational psych space. You do your research and you do a ton of reading, and you have some really incredible beliefs about what this space should look like and what it takes to perform in the space. And what's even cooler in my perspective, and this is all my perspective of seeing you. What's even cooler is that it seems your perspective continually evolves. You seem to always be learning and adding and shifting the way that you view this space. So I don't know. I think this is going to be a lot of fun and we can have some good conversations.
I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And also, I appreciate you saying all those things because sometimes I worry about being too off-putting on the internet, but I also feel like that's my space to learn with people. And sometimes it just really resonates with people. And sometimes it's exactly what people need to hear. And I think when I first started my business, I didn't realize that if you are really authentic with the things that you put out there, the things that you talk about, you end up creating this online community. Like, this is the second podcast I've been a part of with somebody that I've never met in person, right?
Wow.
Like, you end up creating just thought leadership from places that you wouldn't have access to. And I think that that's really cool.
That is cool. And I guess I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
This modern world.
Because you feel like you know me, right? Like,
right.
Because we like talk back and forth and we share information. And you end up like having this like intellectual relationship with people that are in a field that is uncommon, right?
Mm-hmm.
So most people aren't out there studying how organizations work or leadership, and they're not going and getting their PhDs and learning all the things that you're learning. So we're so isolated sometimes in our normal lives that whenever you find people who are studying and talking and thinking about similar things that you are, it's you have a kinship with them. Is that a word? Kinship.
You know what? We're going to go with it. I think it may be like you're kind of going off like the kindred spirit thing, right? I think that's where it comes. Sure.
Totally. But I think that there's people who are in our field that are kindred spirits, right? Like, they want to create better work. And it's so refreshing whenever you meet people that also share those perspectives, because you feel like you're not alone.
Yeah, I agree. And I think coming from a different field that I came from, it always felt that everybody supported each other on the surface, but then in behind the scenes, it felt like they were finding ways to cut each other down and weren't actually supportive of each other. And the funny part is, in this field, and again, maybe that's the case. I don't know in this field. Maybe I haven't had that experience yet, but it seems like everyone wants to learn from each other. We all have our avenues. And of course, there's outliers to that statement, but it does seem like we all have this thirst for knowledge, and we look forward to learning from each other's experiences and the books that we've read and the studies we've done and all of that. So to me, it's just this kind of collaborative effort to make the systems we reside within better. And that's what's so inspiring to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's possible.
Yeah, I agree. And it's fun. I have a
Yeah.
good time, like as nerdy as it sounds, like I have a good time getting into the nitty-gritty of understanding why organizations operate the way they do, why leaders have the effect that they have. It's really interesting.
I have to tell you a story real quick. So I always think about this. I worked with this guy whenever I had my first job. And I had always been, I mean, I've been working since I was 13 years old, right? And like I had to always take care of myself. So I was always finding jobs and always making sure that I was taking care of whatever I needed. And so I always had this image of work as being something that you persevered through. And there was this guy that I worked with, and I can't say anything else good about this guy, but this one point that stood with me is that he said that as soon as work stopped being fun, he got another job.
Hmm.
And and it was the first time in my life I had looked at work and been like, is it okay to have fun at work? Work is supposed to be work. It's not supposed to be fun. But him saying that, it almost gave me the permission to be like, yeah, I should have. This is what I do every day. I should be having fun, you know?
Yep.
And from that point forward, it really shifted my perspective of like, as weird and as entitled as that sounds, if you're not having fun at what you do, you might need to find something else to do. And it's a good thing to have fun at your work.
Right.
It's maybe the
I
best thing.
I mean, you know where I stand on that topic. To me, like I'm dedicating some serious time to that topic. I love the idea
Yeah.
that you should be able to have fun at work while also doing, while also working really hard. I kind of think that work is meant to mimic our real lives. And you're not always having fun in your real life. Sometimes you're doing hard things and you're challenged. Sometimes you're tired. Sometimes you're sad. And sometimes you're having fun. And work should also display all of those emotions that help get us through our day-to-day lives. I think the work environment and culture, leaving room for play, leaving room for fun and enjoyment ultimately just makes work better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we made a decision for anybody who's listening, for our listener one. We've made a decision here that we wanted to, while we do know each other, and as we described through these online back and forth, and then getting to know each other on a couple Zooms here and there and a podcast once before, we made a decision that we wanted to ask each other questions and talk to each other and get to know each other with you all listening and take this opportunity as just an episode of us exploring how we work together, doing something I like to call social contracting here. So understanding the limitations of what we're both agreeing to here and what we like, what we don't like, and taking this time to establish some norms.
Because as you all know, there are times where teams get together and it's a collection of human beings and they don't get to know each other first. And then what happens?
Mm.
Not good stuff.
Yeah, disputes. Good
Anytime I'm
old.
working with a team or an organization and like everyone is like mad at each other and there's disputes and there's just a lot of tension, I'm like, so what did y'all do in the beginning? And they're like, well, we had assignments and we just did all this and this. And I'm like, you're a human. You can't do that.
Exactly. Exactly. Have you ever heard of there's something, oh my God, it's called Tuckman's model?
Mm-hmm.
Tuckman's, yeah, Tuckman's stages of group development, maybe, right? So it's forming, storming, norming, and performing. And then I think adjourning was the last one. They added five. But yeah, it's basically the idea of what you're talking about, right? Where like the groups form, then the storming stage is usually where all this conflict comes out and everybody's personalities start to butt up against each other. And then eventually the group norms form and then they perform well together once they get to know each other. And then the group ends, whatever the project it is, it ends and kind of disbands. But I
Yep.
think you and I are doing an accelerated version of that. Um,
Well, I have my rebellious thoughts. I don't think that that model is necessary. I think it happens just because people don't do the work often up front. They don't
Hmm.
talk about conflict management. They don't create social contracts. So, like, I think that storming is the only way that groups are able to have shared experience with each other. So it's like they stumble through those stages when it doesn't have to be as painful as it normally is. So
Yeah,
that's what we're doing today. We're gonna try to make sure that there's no storming that happens in this new project.
I agree. And I guess storming probably looks different with depends how safe the environment is, right? You can have
Yeah.
conflict without having fights.
It's human nature to and I always go back to this. This is from like the neuro leadership scarf model. They have this really interesting research where they looked at New York, what's the baseball? Sorry, go sports. It's Red
Yankees?
Sox and the Yankees, right?
Yankees, yeah.
Yeah, New Yorker here. I'm like, what is the baseball team in New York? Anyways, they were doing brain images of those two fans, and they found that like the pleasure center basically lit up whether their team was doing well or the other team was doing poorly. So
Mhm.
we're so wired for in group, out group. And I think that that's another reason why that storming happens is just because our brain is like, I'm going to attach myself to some kind of heuristic here. And I want to make sure that I'm, like we're almost not in charge of that unless we really understand what's going on. Like our brain wants to do in group, out groups. I think I mean, there's a million reasons why that storming phase happens, but I think that that's another one as well.
Yeah, for sure. And by the way, I think with all of those types of models and all those, to me, it's just sort of something that explains human behavior and it never looks as
Sure.
clean as that. And I think it just can jump
Yeah,
around between all the different phases and it's always much, much
absolutely.
muddier.
It's so interesting in all these models that you learn. It's like people have they want linear, right? Like even like Maslow's hierarchy of needs was never supposed to be a hierarchy, but people love that it's a
Oh,
hierarchy.
yeah.
Or like the Tuckman model, right? Like these are the things that happen in human behavior. And it's like, no, like we're just a bunch of messy blobs on a rock. Like it's nice. It gives you a language for discussion, but it's not always going to give you this linear path of how people work.
Right. And yeah, I think you're so spot on there. And I think everything that you do in this field, it's like you learn all these models, you do all this research, you look up, you learn everything, there's different assessment styles and approaches and interventions. And then when you actually go to apply them, you just kind of blend them all together and mix and you see little
Absolutely.
bits. And then you use those models to just explain because people love patterns so much. You can use that to
Mm-hmm.
simplify it and explain it to people who don't work in the field, who aren't doing this type of work, or who just need an explanation of what the hell is going on in my company right now. Why isn't this working? Why is my team not performing? Well, they may be in the storming phase. And like, you know, people just want those
It's going to
explanations.
be okay.
Yeah.
You'll get there.
So one way to avoid a storming phase is to jump to the norming phase, uh,
Yeah.
and explore how we can best work together. And, you know, I guess I can start. One thing that always comes to mind when I think about this, and this may be my logical brain speaking, but one thing that comes to mind when we talk about co-hosting a podcast together, as we've both done, is how do we work together to kind of signal to each other when it's our time to talk, especially when we have guests on, without
Mm.
stepping on each other's toes? And how comfortable are either of us with interruption?
That's a really good question. And that's so, see, I just so everybody knows, I gave Blake like 90 assessments before we got on this call because I was like, I'm going to unpack who you are as a human being. And he's like, we need to go to process. And that actually tells you a lot. um, I would say when I am talking in a group, like as boisterous of a human as I am, I think because I've been teaching leadership for so long in collaboration, I can be overly conscientious sometimes of not interrupting people. And I don't know how that comes across on a podcast, but and I'm very aware of this when I'm in meetings too, is that I will I need to like maybe cut people off sooner, but I hate cutting people off. Like I hate when you're doing workout, like when you're doing workshops and you have to tell people to stop their conversations. Like it's my least favorite thing in the entire world, especially when someone's on a roll. So you can always interrupt me, but just know I hate interrupting other people.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. What
Um,
about you?
yeah, no, I mean, I definitely relate to what you said. I think just because of the clinical background, I've gotten very
Mm-hmm.
used to just hearing what people are saying and taking a second to absorb it before I respond. However, I do know I've seen this pattern in myself, where when we get to a topic I'm excited about, or you say something that triggers a thought, I do have a little bit of that squirrel mentality where I jump in
Yeah.
and interrupt a little bit. Um, so it'll be interesting to see. It seems like me and you having conversations would be fine. Maybe when it comes to having a guest on, things get a little bit different, right? Because we both may have a question that we want to ask.
Yeah,
And,
definitely.
we may have to just find a way to go like, all right, your turn, my turn, your turn, my turn, without actually saying that.
Yeah, but we'll figure it out. And a lot of that I think can be mitigated through planning as well, right?
Mhm.
But I mean it's always like a balance of how do you make sure things come across as authentic and spontaneous, but there's also like a lot of planning behind the scenes that we make sure that we're on the same page. And in my last podcast I did, which is just TV and leadership, right? My co-host and I, we really made sure that like I like the guest is the most important thing, and that if we're planned behind the scenes, she's much more planning than I am, then like things will go very smoothly.
Okay, well, that brings us to the next norm then is planning. So,
Yeah.
as you know, you've been a guest on this podcast, and the planning is pretty minimal. I like a
Yeah.
topic, and then we just see where it goes, and I
Yeah.
want to understand why the topic's important to the guest and see where it goes. And I don't typically do a lot of planning, but it's been a one-stop shop for me of just recording whenever I felt like recording. And it's been a little bit different in that way. And I do want some structure. So maybe some
Yeah.
planning. So what I will say then in response to that is if I can ask for some grace up front while
Of
we get
course.
into the planning phase, just give me, because I'm not used to doing that with this, but I am 100% open to it and want it. So
Yeah. And
I'm
listen, I learned that from other people. It's not my natural impulse either. And so that's probably just something we'll both have to work on moving forward. And I think that that's totally fine.
What does planning look like in this type of instance?
I think that if you have a guest, and you already did this whenever I was like a guest on yours, it's just like what the topic is going to be. And then like letting them know in advance, like what are some questions that they need to have responses to. Because I would say, this is just my lived experience, 75% of people, it's really hard for them to think on their feet. So
Mhm.
if you can just like help them, like kind of come up with like what they're going to say and like what resonates with people. Like there's always going to be that natural element where people are going to, I think you and I are probably both people that just, strangers on the street talk to. Are
Yes,
you
very
that
much
type of
so.
person? Okay.
Very
Yeah.
much so. I'm also the type that I talk to strangers on the street. So
Yeah, same. Like we don't have to worry about that. Like you got a lot of extroversion here, but the world isn't extroverts, right? Like so you just have to make sure you take care of people.
do you feel you're an extrovert?
Oh, yeah. It's
Yeah.
not, I'm like off the charts.
Are you? Oh my God.
Oh, for sure. All right, wait,
I
what are you? And
No
what
way.
assessment did it come from?
Um, it came from the assessment of lived experience.
Okay, not like
uh,
a BTI or something like that.
No, no. So for me, I just know it's one of those things of just paying attention to where I'm thriving and how I'm feeling.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Yeah,
know for myself, I can be very extroverted. I don't have a fear of speaking to people, um, usually strangers. It doesn't bother me at all. What I don't love is like a conference, for example. If I'm
yeah,
at a conference, I feel it feels like forced conversation and I shut
yeah.
down. Also, I know if there's a lot of socializing with new people or maybe acquaintances or some like light friends, I need like a day to recover.
Yeah.
So I'm like that ambivert where
Yeah,
I
totally.
go both ways and I can totally shut myself down and be fine by myself for a couple days. I'm not fully extroverted. And it takes me some time to get there as well.
Yeah. I think also, well, I will say, I hope this is okay. We bring this up already. Is one of the reasons why I wanted to do this podcast with you is because I'm really curious about this intersection of organizational behavior and addiction.
Mhm.
So, and I actually think that it's the fact that you have had all these lived experiences is amazing, right? It's going to be able to help so many people because you do live at that intersection. I know you know this statistic, but it's not even people that are living with addiction and struggling through it, but the family members that are affected by it. Like there's astronomical numbers that are out there. And anyways, what I was going to say is that you have had lived a different life, right?
Mhm.
So like you're probably a much older like like when it comes to like evolving and the things that you've gone through, you're in a different place than most people are, right? And
Sure.
so like I've noticed that like as extroverted as I was when I was younger, like now that I'm older, I'm not as extroverted. And also since I stopped drinking, it's gotten a lot harder. Right. So like when I was the life of the party and everybody was going out and having martinis, like I could take that role a lot easier. And now I still have it, right? Like I still want to bring people together. I still like that's where I get my energy from, but it's different now. So might be a whole nother conversation, but there's things that are woven in there of how you change as you grow and evolve.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think, do you mind me asking on the
Yeah,
pod right
anything.
here of like, so how long has it been since you stopped drinking?
2 years.
Two
So I
years, right?
stopped drinking after New Year's of 2 years ago. So it's been a little over 2 years actually. I used to
Yeah.
celebrate. I mean, my situation was it was just it was different in a way because like I
Mhm.
always knew that alcohol didn't work for me. I never had, I mean, we had a lot of fun in college. You know, millennials had a very party culture when they were in college and post college. And we all just kind of got swept up into that life, right? But it never worked for me. Like I always like my body doesn't like it, my mind doesn't like it, and I just kept doing it because it's what everybody was doing, you know?
Mhm.
Like
Yeah,
I was like, I'm not gonna go beat my friends at a brewery and like have a water. That's weird.
sure.
Um, but it was just too much anxiety, too many hangovers. And like one of my best friends, like she also woke up and we were like hungover after New Year's. And I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And she was like, I don't either. And so we did it together. And like
Wow.
you know how I am, I'm like hyper fixated on things. So I went and read like every book about alcohol and all the quit lit. And that's really, I don't know, it's what changed it for me. So
The quit lit. I don't think I've
yeah,
ever heard that. That's
you
amazing.
have it.
No, I've never heard referred to as the quit lit. That's
Yeah, there's
incredible.
so many, but well, now it's popular, right? Like
Well, I mean,
I
I've
thought
heard
I
of
was,
the books
yeah.
that exist. I just have never heard it referred to as quit lit.
I
That's
mean,
so
people
great.
going alcohol free is
Hmm.
becoming more popular.
Oh yeah, the dry movement, the
Mhm.
alcohol free, the party
People,
sober. There's a
yeah.
ton of it. Well, so the reason why I asked how long it's been is that, well, I guess a follow-up question then was, how many years did you use alcohol while socializing
Oh,
prior
I
to
mean,
quitting?
well, I actually didn't start drinking till I was in college because I like was so focused on sports in high school. But yeah, like it was college. Like I have ADHD. And so it was like when I would drink, it was like that was the only time my mind would be calm and not
Hmm.
going 19,000 miles an hour, right? And like I hadn't gone when I was younger, especially like of course, especially at that time in the early 2000s, right? Like I hadn't been to therapy. I wasn't doing yoga. Like I didn't know what anxiety was, but I knew that going out with my friends would like make my brain stop working. And I like that a lot, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. No, and
Yeah.
the only reason I'm asking for those different
No,
metrics
I
is
love
just
it.
is well, it's because I think it takes a long time for our like the neuroplasticity to shift and for us to start going like, I'm comfortable socializing without it. It took me probably 5, 6 years now where I don't even think about it anymore.
Yeah.
When I do go to breweries and get a glass of water at this point, just because it's like, well, that's where my friends are. And
Yeah.
so it to me, it's not a it takes some time, but it was very uncomfortable for a
Hmm.
long time. And then it just slowly goes away where all of a sudden you realize alcohol is not a part of your life. People ask if you want to drink, and you're like, no, it's all good. It's good. I don't drink. And I've never had a response from somebody who's like, why not? That's crazy.
Oh,
You should
I
be.
have.
Have you?
Oh my God. Yeah. But that,
I've only had one person say to me, actually go, well, alcohol's not your problem. So alcohol wasn't your problem. Like, why are you not drinking? And I'm like, what do
interesting.
you know about what my problem was? You know, like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, well, okay. I don't we're shifting gears here, but this is what it's about. So it's
We're
okay.
Norman.
We're Norman. So two things that you just said about how it takes a long time, that has been one of the most surprising things to me. Like I remember just like feeling so good after 2 months, and I was like, this is so cool. I'm like sleeping and my anxiety is better. I just was like, oh, my body's probably healed, right? It's kind of like when you're hungover and then like 3 days go by and you feel better, right? You're like, all right,
Mhm.
all this is out of my body. Like I did not realize I was going to keep feeling different. I mean, I still feel different, right? Like
Yeah.
it's been 2 years and I feel like my body is still healing. And I really only drank like on the weekends. I mean, I would binge drink on the weekends, but like, you know what I mean? Like it's
For sure.
wild the impact it has on your body. And
What's those
the
habits you've
yeah,
created?
yeah.
Yeah, I
Oh,
think that, oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say like the other thing of people saying things. Um, yeah, it's interesting because you automatically become a mirror to people. And I think I read this, but I see it all the time because nobody really enjoys the aftermath of drinking, right? Like it sucks if like it anyways, it does. Like that's just a
Yeah.
fact. But and so it's kind of like when you don't drink, you can sometimes become a mirror to other people, and they really, really don't like that. So it's like you hear those deflecting responses from people sometimes of like, well, you were doing other stuff. That was your problem. Alcohol's fine. Like, or I remember one time I was talking to someone close to me and they were like, that they should not be drinking. And they were like, well, it's just beer. It's not
Yeah.
ethanol. And I was like, no, like
It
I don't
is.
mean to be a Debbie Downer here, but like our ideas of like alcohol being different from all these other things is actually planted out there. Like
Yeah.
it's advantageous that we're like, oh well, this is fine. This destroys my relationships in my life and all these things, but it's fine. But all those other things, those are terrible. Like what is so wild?
We're getting so off on a tangent here, but it's fine. We'll pull this back in a second. I remember hearing recently from he's an alcohol historian, and
Oh,
he was talking about how essentially agriculture exists because of alcohol.
interesting.
Whatever it was, and this is totally probably wrong number, maybe 20, 30,000 years ago, they had discovered how to make beer, essentially, or
Yeah.
ale. And they figured out this plant, but it was wild at the time, this plant, that if they fermented it, that they could have alcohol. And they had to figure out a way, okay, how do we grow this plant so that we can make more alcohol and remain high all the time from the alcohol? So essentially, there's beliefs that exist that agriculture was created to create alcohol.
Interesting.
So humans have been drinking and normalizing the fact that we're putting poison into our system, which is what it is technically. We're poisoning our system um, for thousands of
Ever.
years now, and so that's why it is so hard to quit. It's so part of our social structures. It's so normal to drink. There's alcohol everywhere you go. But for me, I certainly don't care if somebody wants to drink.
God,
Um, I
no.
think it's Great. I think the funny question I get that probably get more, which is actually very sweet, is, oh no, like, are you okay if I drink?
Yeah.
And I always have to be like, actually, I want you to drink. Like, go have fun, enjoy yourself. I think for me, what has changed socially, because obviously I used alcohol as well as a social lubricant, and the what's changed for me is my bandwidth for being around people who are drinking. So I can socialize to an extent, but then once the room gets nice and toasty, I just don't have the bandwidth anymore to be there. And I've learned to set those boundaries with myself of going, I'm bored. This kind of sucks for me.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go. Like, and not being afraid of what that looks like. And I typically, a lot of my friends joke, they call me Grandpa Blake, but it's because like I'm gonna go to bed early because everyone's getting messed up, and it's not fun for me.
And you know what is fun? And I, like me, 3 or 4 years ago, would be rolling her eyes so far back in her head. But what's fun is mornings, like just
Oh yeah,
just feeling good in a morning. Like that's my new Saturday night, you know? And it's
yeah,
lame, but I just don't care anymore, you know?
yeah. I don't know. It's just a very different way you perceive everything. You remember everything. It's just for me, it's much more enjoyable, and I just feel healthier. I
Yeah.
think I'm aging slower too, which that could be genetics. Again, totally maybe wrong here, but I've
You
seen a lot
haven't
of
gone to
people
your 20-year high school reunion yet, have you?
actually
You're gonna
20
see
years
a
would be
case
next
study.
year. It would be this year would be my
you're
20
gonna
years.
you're gonna see a case study of if
Yeah.
that is of how true that is, my friend.
You know,
Just kidding. That's mean. That's mean. I love everyone.
no, you're probably right. It's funny you even bring that up because that's also such like a millennial thing to bring up because I don't even know. I mean, I've never gone to a high school reunion in my life. Um, but like that was big a long time ago. I also don't think it's big in Florida. Like it's South Florida. I just
Oh,
don't
high
think like
school
people,
reunions.
yeah, like people don't do that.
Oh,
Like
oh, I'm from like small town Texas. It's like, yeah,
it's a big deal.
but I graduated with 120 people, right? So
Oh
like
my God.
we were like family, you
Yeah.
know. So it's just different. Like
I think there was
you
almost
are bonded with those people in a way that's like unexplainable.
right. You go through every grade with them
Yeah,
from
totally.
kindergarten on. Yeah, no, I mean, for me, I think there was 1,800 people in my
Yeah,
graduating class. Like I wouldn't even
yeah,
recognize most people,
yeah.
nor would
That's
I
great.
want to.
That
I don't really
that's
care.
yeah. Our little town was kind of strange, but it was also now going back, it's a whole different experience. Like I was so ready to get out of there, but it's a really beautiful place. So it's like this small town, but there's like this beautiful river that goes through it. And like now when I go back and I realize that the rest of the world is not like that, I'm like, it's a very, very special place.
Yeah. Um, okay, so bringing it back to norming, I
Yes.
think that we just set another norm that it's okay to ask each other personal questions. We're pretty much
Yeah,
open books, both of us. We're willing to
totally.
share about our experiences. So that's good. That's good to know as well. I do think that most of the time with guests that I've had on the podcast, um, and maybe it just comes naturally, but I've always taken that approach, and it does seem like it leads to really great conversations. I can't tell you the amount of times I've had guests on here say, "I can't believe we just talked about that," you know, and I have to offer, "Do you want me to edit that out?" You know, like, are you comfortable? And they're
Yeah.
like, "No, actually, it was great."
Yeah.
So I think that's great. Um, I do want to jump to this assessment. So I have a
Okay.
funny, I appreciate
Yeah.
assessments. I'm going to throw that out there. I appreciate assessments. I also, though, similar going back to our conversation about all the different models and all the different things, I think assessments are nice and they can give you some information about the person. I also think that they have a tendency at times to put people into boxes
Oh,
that
for
are never
sure.
clean cut. So for me, assessments are great and typically almost like a horoscope. They, which I guess we're going to get to as well.
We
But
don't have to.
no, it's fine. They are weirdly accurate, but I almost wonder if a lot of the assessments can be catch-alls, where
For
there's
sure.
enough information that confirms that it's either who you want to be or what you look like. And there's some information on there that's not, but you kind of disregard it because there's information that does look like you.
Yeah, it's
I just question
suggestibility. It's the
assessments.
same thing with
Suggestibility.
astrology, right?
Yes.
One of my, I always keep this in mind, one of my favorite grad school professors, shout out Dr. Pierce Howard. He's the one who he popularized the Big Five personality.
Mhm.
And so he not popularized it. I don't know if that's the right word. He just kind of like helped people start using it in businesses.
Popularized.
He yeah, he was so cool. And he was such a feminist. So he was just like the coolest guy. He'd always be like, all these statistics don't matter because they didn't test them on women. Y'all are left out of everything. And I was like, huh.
Can I just want to chime in. So there was something that
Yeah.
I had just saw recently that it changed my perspective on a lot of research that they call it, most research is done on weird people, which is white, educated,
And experienced. I
maybe
don't
it's
know.
an
What is
experience.
it?
Let's hold on. I'm going to look it up real quick. So if you want to finish the story about him, I'll come back to
No,
this.
I was just gonna say, like one of the things he always said, because he would teach us. He was like taught us a lot about statistics and personality assessments, obviously, and he would say that the only real money to make in OD is by creating an assessment. So it's like if you think about that, it's like capitalism, right? That's why there's so many assessments out there, and you have so many people that are going and hawking and saying that their assessments the cure all, and you'll never have a bad hire ever again if you just invest in their thing. You know what I mean? Like that's why is because it's like where the most money is. So of course there's 1,000 assessments that say that they're the magic bullet.
Well, exactly. And it goes back to what we talked about earlier, that people love patterns.
Yeah,
People
totally.
need explanations for things. And I
Yeah.
think you and I had a conversation at one point about spirituality in the workplace. And part of
Mm,
spirituality to me is just faith. And I'm not saying faith in any particular higher power, but just faith in things that they're going to work out, that they're happening as they're supposed to, that things are going to be okay, that if you're doing the right thing, good things will happen. But I think that is a really hard place to grasp for people because
mm.
there's no confirmation, there's no concrete evidence. But I have a tendency to believe that stuff. And it is really tough for people because there's no way I can explain that to you.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. It's why people are so, like they're so uncomfortable and like what they feel is chaos. That
Hmm.
they create all these systems that make themselves feel like they're in control, even though the systems might not even work, but it makes them feel like they're in control, right?
Right.
I think that feeling of not being in control and trying to grasp at it motivates so many different activities and the humans working together with other humans. Like, yeah, anyways, we can have a
Yeah.
whole episode on that.
Um, so weird, the WEIRD, when it comes to psychological and social science studies, stands for, which I messed this up. So I'm glad that we looked it up. It's
Was
Western.
W not white? Oh, okay.
It's not white, it's Western. So like Western cultures, Western society,
Okay.
educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic.
Interesting.
So that
Yep.
just because typically most of this research is done at a university and they're just bringing in psych students usually, or it's done at an organization, or they're polling
Yeah.
people who are working in some type of corporate America, and a lot of the times it does lead to bias in the results. So it's a, sort of one of those things where
Totally.
this may imply something, a lot of the research that exists out there, but also it may not represent what it could look like in South Africa uh, at the marketplace. Like they may feel differently about a certain social aspect.
Also, and to put another piece on this is neurodivergency. So
Hmm.
it's like they could probably put like a whole nother letter there of it's just like like normal people, because if there's any kind of neurodivergency that's detected inside of a population, they're taken out of the sample because it would be too sporadic, right? Like a
Hmm.
researcher wants to get juicy results. And if they're if you have these kind of like outliers, it's going to mess with the statistics and the research. So that it makes it harder. So,
Totally.
but the reason why this is problematic is because you have people walking around a workforce and they're like, oh, well, 80% of your profit's going to come out of 20, like, it's like that the Pareto principle has been like, it has been disbanded for so long, right? Like it's not a thing, but you believe it's a thing. And once it becomes a belief system, it's really, really hard to unwire. And that goes back to even like, like this stuff when it comes to alcohol and addiction. Like one of the reasons why people don't stop drinking is because they have beliefs around it, that it makes them funny, that it makes them more social, that it makes them this other person. And one of the things you have to not have to do, but one of the things that like they talk about a lot is that you have to go back and unravel those beliefs, and that's what allows you to have behavior change. So like we might think that it's innocuous, that like we have all this research that doesn't include the population, but it ends up creating belief systems inside of workforces that it's really hard to unwind. Like even companies that are still doing this like rank and yank thing, like they're firing the top 10% because they think that 10% of the people have to be low performers. Like that has been disproven so many times, but they can't get away from it because it creates these belief systems. All right, my TED talk is done on that. Anyways, yes, personality profiles are helpful, but they are limited.
Yeah, exactly. But I do think they provide some insight, and it's always interesting to get to know. So I did the one that you sent me, the affirmer style.
Ooh, okay, cool.
What is it? What was this one
That's the
called?
people one. That's probably what you get on all personality
Okay.
profiles that you take.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I have the affirmer style,
Okay.
which of course, reading this made a lot of sense for me.
Well, here,
Although,
let me ask you a question on this.
okay.
Because this is one of the assessments that I teach, and I actually really like because it's different. Because it talks about our fears and our motivation. And I'm also an affirmer, and I had to sit with this for a while. Do you think you have a core fear of rejection? That's a big, juicy question.
I don't I don't know anymore.
Okay, that's okay. Yeah.
I don't know. I think I did at one point. I think it's more of a fear of not being liked, which I guess could be
Mm-hmm.
the same thing,
Yeah. Yeah,
right?
totally.
If I'm
Yes.
being not liked, I'm being rejected. So I guess it could be the
Yeah.
same thing. And I think it's so situationally dependent.
Yeah.
Um, relationship wise, like back before I was married, like I didn't care about rejection at all. But it was rejection of, I think professional rejection scares me.
Mm, yeah. Yep.
I always want to have like a sense of respect or importance in whatever field I'm in and feel like I really think that comes from a place of wanting to feel like I'm making an impact and that what I'm doing matters.
Yes. Yep.
Do you have a fear of rejection?
So with this model, it's that like there's this idea that if you are not aware of your fears will run your life, right? So like if you're afraid of rejection, you'll run around trying to make everybody happy and you'll run yourself ragged. I have absolutely had that phase of my life. And the other ones are if you're so afraid that someone's going to betray you, you try to like control everything and then people end up betraying you. And the other one is that like if you're so afraid of failure, you end up micromanaging everybody and then you end up failing, right? So it's this idea that what you're afraid of will come back at you, but it's not like it stays there your whole life. Like being aware of that allows you to actualize, like move into this self-actualization. And um and and I think that even knowing that, right? Like I'm in this field, I've taken 19,000 personality assessments and like 19,000 360s. Like if someone tries to come and be like, oh, I want to teach you something about yourself, I'm like, bro, like you just, I'm
Yeah.
tired.
Barking up the wrong tree. I got it.
Like I know every one of my strengths and every one of my weaknesses, and I'm always here for learning, but I have a different perspective at this point.
Should
So I
carry around a
will
filing cabinet with you with just all the files of every
Yeah.
assessment you've taken and be like, what aspect of me did you want to teach me? And you can just
Yeah. Like, what
pull
do
out
you
the
want to,
paper.
I don't mean to be an asshole here, but like, what do you want to know? It's
Yeah.
like that idea of like when you get a new therapist, you should show up with a PowerPoint so you don't have
Oh
to
my
like take
God.
a whole
Honestly, I think that's the reason.
here's a pre-read.
Yeah, I think that that stops so many people from getting therapy because it's just like, I don't want to tell this story again. Where do I start?
Yeah, like let's just jump through all this. One of
Yeah.
my favorite times I did that with a new therapist. He was like, "Oh, tell me about your family." And then I started telling him, but then he was like, "Hold on, I need another sheet of paper."
Oh my God. Oh my God. The notes thing, which obviously, I mean, I take notes all the time, but it's one of those things where I try to do it so discreetly because I always stop talking when they're taking notes. Maybe it's because I've done like
Oh,
mental health care and been in that field
yeah.
that I know what it's like to try to take a note while someone's talking. But the note thing makes me crazy because I pause every time I see them taking a note so they can finish their note.
Interesting.
And
Oh
then I lose
yeah,
my train of thought.
that's an affirmer, right? Like
I knew that
you're
was
trying to
coming.
people
Yeah,
please
I
your
knew
own
that was coming.
therapist.
Yeah. Oh my God. So what this has happened, and that's why I say I'm not sure anymore because I've done a ton of work on this. But with my current therapist, when we first started, I can tell she was having a bad day. She did
Oh,
nothing wrong. She didn't say anything. I can just tell she was flustered. And she's asking me about questions about me. And I'm like, can we stop for a second? Are you okay? What's been going on? And like, I'm checking on her. She's like, can you stop checking on me? I'm like, yeah, sorry. It's just
yeah. Wait, me and one
something's
of my
wrong. I can
girl
tell. Yeah.
me and one of my girlfriends have this like ongoing joke of like who's gonna befriend their therapist first. We're like, this is the time I'm going in. She's gonna say you can't be my patient anymore. I want to be your best friend.
Yeah. Oh God, I'm waiting for that too. That's so true. I'm waiting for that. I, I also have a vicious competitive streak in me of it's weird. I don't want to compete with other people. It's constantly like, how do I level up? How do I
Mm,
get something new? How do I win? Whatever it is. And I want to win therapy. And so
yeah.
I like every time I go in, I'm like, this is going to be the time she tells me I'm done. And I sit there and I'm like, at the end, I'm like, she's like, so when do you want to schedule next? I'm like, do we need that?
Do you
Do we
think
need,
you
do
don't
we
think I
need
won
this?
here?
Yeah, come on.
Healed and
Did,
healed.
did you hear what I said this whole session? I am good. And it never works out. She's like, no, I think we need another one.
I don't think you ever I don't know. I think therapy is a lifetime thing. It's weird to even think that people think that like there's like a start and end to it, you
Well,
know?
this is where, as someone who's worked in that field for so long, of course, you're 100% right. There is no
Yeah.
end, and you can always be better. That's where my mind is so fucked up, is
Yeah.
that I'm like, I'm going to be the one that they're like, I don't know what just happened, but there's a breakthrough. You've just defied science.
We don't need to have a therapist at all anymore because of you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you be my therapist now? Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
That's do you ever do you watch the show Shrinking?
yeah, great.
That part where Harrison Ford, like he actually asked his patient to go out for a beer. I'm like, I was texting my friend. I was like, look, it's possible. This is
It's
gonna happen to me.
it's possible. Oh man,
Uh,
I couldn't
and then my
imagine doing
therapist
that.
is always like, did you know that humor is deflecting so you don't have to actually feel your feelings? And I'm like, can you shut the fuck up?
Yeah. I have this whole TED Talk thing about humor, and so it's been coming up a lot in the talk or in my therapy sessions. But she actually, humor for me was a major deflection, and really it was my childhood coping mechanism with all of the chaos that existed in my life. I've used humor like that was my role in my family
Yeah.
as I drew myself at one
I
point.
just learned about family systems, by the way, and I'm
Oh,
obsessed with that. I
great.
can't believe it took me so long.
Yeah.
But
No, it's
yeah,
incredible.
speaking of patterns,
There's an
wait,
organizational.
will you give everyone here just like the smallest like overview of it? Can you rattle it off the top of your head?
Of all the different roles within a
Or
family.
just, yeah, that's probably too long, but just a,
Yeah.
okay.
So just the general idea is that everybody, just as in an organization, and there is something called the organizational role analysis. That's a
Ooh, I
really
haven't heard of that
incredible.
one.
No, it's really incredible and it's very deep. And there's multiple ways to do it, and it requires drawing. But you essentially, it's all about the roles that we all play through our childhood, through our teen years, through our early careers, through later careers, and so on and so forth. And how you can almost look as you draw these little boxes, you can almost see the connection all the way through. And there's an
Cool.
evolution sometimes, and sometimes they're almost exactly the same feelings. And so doing this assignment, which I brought to my therapist, which I it was a bit crazy, but
Wait, did she give you an A with it when you brought it?
always, always
Obviously.
kidding me?
Okay. Okay.
Always.
Just checking.
Yeah, don't even need to ask that question. Um, but I brought it to her because there was what I saw in there was this deep connection of how my role in my family system was, I call it the jester, but it was sort of the peacekeeper,
Yeah.
and using humor and um,
Levity.
levity and consoling people
Hmm.
through like, hey, everything's all good, and like making jokes and having fun. And it was my coping mechanism that eventually turned on me through my late teen, early 20s that led to my addiction uh, forming because my identity was split and it was no longer comforting me. And I started playing the role of a jester while also deeply inside being in tons of pain. And so
Mm.
it added up essentially over the years. I was absorbing all of this trauma and all of this stuff while still playing this role, but no longer feeling like it was working for myself. And eventually that led to where I am now, where I feel a whole lot more comfortable, but I still use that same coping mechanism. But it's like a superpower used for good now. Like I
Hmm.
developed this
Oh,
power
that's
that was used
cool.
for good to protect me early on, that now it's used. It's like a muscle for me that I have that I'm able to use in situations that bring levity and lightness and actually helps in my leadership style.
I like that.
I
That's a
don't know
good
how we
way.
got here.
I don't know. Where are we? Anyways, the get to know you episode.
Yeah, it's got deep.
You can't get to know anyone without knowing their family trauma. See, that would be like the ideal conference. Is that like there's like no small talk rule? Like it's only like your family
Mhm.
trauma and how you've healed from it, and that's the only conversation.
Seriously. Tell me your
People are
most,
like, and TV, like your favorite TV episodes or good movies and family trauma. That's it.
yeah, right. This is a good idea, actually. I really love that. It would be so interesting. And how quickly would you get to know people?
Right.
Honestly, for my sobriety was a great lesson for me early on in having deep conversations, like how vulnerability helps. Of There were so many times because in the beginning of my sobriety, I felt like I lost my identity.
How
So I
old
didn't
were you?
26
26. Okay.
or 25 actually, 25. So
That's so crazy.
yeah, I
It
know.
like
Well,
like
it wasn't just alcohol, so things got bad quickly.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But I'm just saying like to like that journey so young. I mean, I'm sure other people do, but like it's like you went through that when everybody else is just like in a whole different phase of life, right? Like I
Mhm.
always think that I think it would have been a lot harder to stop drinking if I didn't like if I would have been that age, like I don't know. But
Yeah,
anyways, it's a really cool part of your story if you need to hear that today.
cool. Well, thank you. Um, so early on, my only sense of identity that I had was that I'm a sober person now.
Mm,
And so oftentimes when I'm meeting new people, I would bring that up pretty quickly. I would find a way to crowbar it into a conversation. But by doing so, it always led to these really incredible, deep conversations with people that I've never met.
Yeah.
And it became like oh wow, I have a key here that unlocks people's real side and not just their surface level side. So it was really uh, inspiring to me to see that. I think if vulnerability begets vulnerability, as I think
Yeah.
Brene Brown says that, right? But it's so true. And I was able to see that experience of going, hey, if I share something about myself, you're going to share something about yourself, and that's going to lead to a deep conversation.
Totally. Yeah. And I mean, it goes back again. So one of my best friends and I talk about this a lot because she has addiction in her family and she's been dealing with it her whole life, right? So she always like describes this instance where she's like up on a stage and she's like giving this talk and she's like everyone thinks she's the most professional person in the world, and then the phone rings and something horrible has happened, right? And I've had that experience too because I have addiction in my family, and it's like, but she said like the moment that she started opening up, and like even her opening up about it made me feel like I could talk about it, because there's such shame when people are like, oh, how's this person and this person. You don't want to be like, it really fucking sucks right now, like I don't know what to do, I'm
Yeah,
lost, like you're so, like whether it's yourself or it's the people in your family, like everybody's got something. And I think that that's like one of the things that she said was she realized like the moment she started opening up is that like it's like it's almost like everybody's dealing with it but nobody's talking about it.
right. Yeah, it's so true. And then nobody feels like it's okay to bring
Yeah.
up. And I've heard for all these years there's so much stigma around addiction. Although I've never personally felt that stigma from
Yeah.
anybody. And I don't know many people who've been judged for having some type of addiction or alcoholism or issue with substances, or anything else in general. If you open up about it as a human being, you humanize the illness.
Mm-hmm.
And people can see that, oh, it doesn't define who this person is. They had some issues. We've all had issues. But recently I've been noticing in the political sphere, and maybe this is not the appropriate place to bring this up, but um, RFK, whether you like him, don't like him, I don't really have many feelings about it, but I've been noticing on social media, yeah, now that he's been put into office and confirmed, I'm noticing there's all these posts about him removing high fructose corn syrup and removing this and removing that. And everyone's commenting on it. Oh, he's removing that but God forbid you remove his heroin from him, a guy who's been sober for 20 years, who has
Yeah.
been open about his issue. So you start to see that there is an undercurrent of weaponizing addiction against people, I guess, when the time feels right for people. So I guess stigma does exist. Um, but I still think that it's nothing to be ashamed, or you shouldn't be afraid of bringing up once you've come out on the other side, or asking
Yeah,
for
for
help.
yeah, no, I think we're just like at an interesting time with it all right now, but it's cool, right? Like speaking of getting to know each other and like healthy stuff, like my parents are like, oh, like, well, my dad's more of an OG hippie, my mom has like beliefs but she's I'm not going to talk about that right now.
Okay. Can't wait to hear about that.
Anyways, but my mom was very food conscious, right? And so is my dad. My dad grew all of his own vegetables. He lives out in the middle of Texas, and he lives like a very sustainable lifestyle.
Uh,
But growing up in that environment, I was the only person that had parents like that, right? So like I've seen, and I wouldn't talk about it because I wouldn't get bullied, but I've been a vegetarian my whole life, for an example, right? And so
okay.
like people would like put meat in my sandwiches, and like I was the only one that had like actual peanut butter on their on their
Right.
sandwiches. So people would be like, "What's that?" I'd be like, "That's bread," and they'd be like, "That doesn't look like bread." I'd be like, "We eat different bread, and I your bread tastes a lot better than mine." Um, but it's just like through my life I've been watching people almost like the society change their like their views on health because it used to not matter, right?
Right.
And like people wouldn't believe it, like even like this disconnection people have between food and the environment is going to be really interesting. Like
Hmm.
that's what I'm keeping an eye on. I'm like, you think you can decouple all of these chemicals they're putting in your food and not keep an eye on what's going on in the environment? But we shall see. But I
Right.
will say, I think it's cool. Like I'm glad I for what I hope things get okay in the world, but from like a healthy eating standpoint and people paying attention to what's in food, like I think it's kind of bipartisan at this point.
I hope
And that
so.
yeah, like I think that's I don't know, I guess some silver lining in this shit show that is our country right now.
I think the weirdest stance that people take against RFK, which there's a lot that people can pick apart and be upset with if they wanted to. I think the weirdest stance that I see people take is being upset over removing dyes from our food, removing the high fructose corn syrup.
You
I'm like,
think people are upset about that? Are they?
I've seen people responding to it in like a really negative way.
Oh,
And it's
interesting.
to me, it's the strangest thing. But I think it's also again comes to life experience and exploring other cultures and understanding the difference it makes when you eat vegetarian farm grown food your whole life
Yeah.
versus the way you feel after eating heavily processed foods or chemicals. I mean, I know I've traveled to Costa Rica or wherever and I can eat whatever I want and I feel amazing afterwards.
Even Canada. Have you been to Canada lately? Like
I
how
actually
is it
have lately, which is weird. Yes.
like
Amazing
even
croissant.
I was in Canada a few months ago and I was like, why does everything I'm eating delicious? This is so weird. We're so close to each
Seriously.
other.
No, I know. It's just we have such different laws. I think people are going to need to experience it for themselves. And once they realize how they feel, if they're willing to remove political bias from
Mm,
how they feel, which I don't know if it's possible or not, I think they may realize, oh, wait, this might be a better way of living and eating.
interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, my family's been talking about red dye being in food since like the 80s. You know what I mean? So, like, in my
Wow.
mind, the world is just like catching up and thinking that they have found something new, but they're
Yeah,
really just like on the hippie bandwagon.
right. Turns out
So,
those hippies knew a thing or two.
so it's like all these like super conservative those like the Baha mamas are like, yeah, like our food should like not have chemicals. I'm like, no shit.
Yeah.
Welcome to the party.
I don't know. It's
Where have you been?
yeah, right? Like thanks for catching up finally. I've been trying to eat this way forever and been saying this for so long. Um the it's funny with my parents are kind of the exact opposite. So they're that like baby boomer generation, I think, um 55, born in 1955.
Is that still a boomer? Yeah, they're boomers.
I think so. Yeah. They have that whole like
They complain a lot.
100%. Oh my, well, of course. We're Jews. We're professional complainers. Um, but they have this philosophy of like you 100% trust whatever the government tells you. The FDA
Really?
can be trusted. The food we eat is perfectly fine.
No
Everything's been
way.
tested.
Maybe
You
it's
go to
just a
the
boomer
doctor.
thing.
Yeah, I think so. And you go to the doctor for everything. You take it if you have a headache, you immediately you take an aspirin. And I'm like, I don't have to though. I can maybe I'm dehydrated. Like, or you just wait it out. It'll be fine. Like there's sort of a different philosophy of living there.
Yeah.
I remember even the other day going to my wife and I went to Dallas for like a weekend trip just to go explore Dallas. And we did the whole JFK assassination tour.
Oh, cool.
And wow, the Kennedys are
Uh,
being brought up a lot on this episode.
yeah.
Well, we did the whole JFK assassination tour. And of course, as part of it, they present to you these different theories. I'm like, well, they say it was this guy, but was it actually this guy or was it the mob or was it Cuba? Was it this? Was it that? And I remember going back, my dad's a huge history buff and going back to report to my dad, like, hey, dad, this is what we were learning, but there are some other theories. And his big reaction to me stating that it could have been someone else besides God, what was his name?
Harry Oswald? No.
Not Harry
Man, we're
Oswald.
good. Something.
Uh, it might be.
I don't know.
It is Oswald,
Is it? Okay, cool.
not
Who's
Harry
Harry
though.
Oswald?
Isn't that from like Spider-Man?
Maybe. Oh, that there's a lot of Spider-Man that happens in my house. That is definitely what it
Yeah.
is.
Let me see. Who killed JFK? I can't believe this is like a total brain fart moment. Um, let's see. Lee Harvey Oswald. Okay. So you were
Ah,
close.
not the
Um,
goblin.
not the Goblin. So I remember bringing up that it could have been someone else besides Lee Harvey Oswald. I'm just like, saying it could have been. The reaction I got was like, "You are insane. They did the research. It's a very possible shot." I'm like, "Whoa!" It's like the government. You got to trust them. They did their work. I'm like, "Really?"
We grew up different.
Yeah. Did we? Yeah. So maybe your parents were the total opposite. Like they questioned everything.
Everything.
Oh wow.
Like, I mean, my mom will unplug Alexas when she comes to our house because I mean, but that was like, they all thought like all the hippies thought that like the government was listening in on them back in the day. So like my parents grew up that like the government was the enemy.
Yeah. Well, it turned out they
And
kind
I
of
mean,
were listening, but
yeah, I will tell you something, and my mom listens to my podcast sometimes, so I do these things. But the fact that she has ended, like the fact that her beliefs are becoming mainstream is the most annoying thing about all of this. Like I mean, I don't know. It's obnoxious. Yeah, she used to
yeah.
be like, Kara Jane, there's these things called dare officers at school, and they're trying to get you to turn your parents in. You don't say anything to them. And I'd be like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Oh my God, that's so funny. Well, maybe these are those moments where we form biases in our mind of that our parents are wrong and maybe they're right and maybe they're not. And,
I think
these are the
that
times where we learn.
I think that critical thinking is all being able to say, I can hold a conflicting view in my mind,
Yeah.
right? Like I can see my way, but I can also hold that other view and I can see it from someone else's perspective. Like the moment we're not able to do that, it means that we've entered dogmatic thinking. And it doesn't matter what age you are, it doesn't matter what's going on. Like we have to be able to do that. I mean, yes, there's right and wrong, but we have to be able to see things from another perspective, or else people become, it's just tunnel vision.
Right. And we get nowhere. Then it's just a
Yeah.
brick against a brick. You can't
Yeah.
move them. No, so I totally agree. And I think that is an ultimate state that we should all strive for, is to be able to hold opposing beliefs in our mind and be able to choose which one we prefer, but it doesn't mean that we have to fight against the other belief.
Yeah. I listened to this author. What's her name? Julie. She has this. It's like called like a Brave New World. She wrote a book on critical thinking, but she always says like when you're with somebody who you feel like is very different, you need to ask the question of like, how do you think that we can achieve a more beautiful world? And like
Hmm.
that always like opens people up. And I don't know. I always like that. Like, what if people started conversations like that? Like,
That's
what
such a
is your view?
disarming, so disarming.
Right?
Yeah.
But whether you think someone's completely opposite of you, and I think about this all the time, is that person believes that the way that they think, whether it's their political, their religious, all the things, that is going to create a more beautiful world, you
Hmm.
know? Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, it is.
It's
And I think
weird.
anybody who doesn't want to do that, or at least kind of level the playing field and figure out a way to work together and merge our beliefs and maybe find a
Yeah.
shared value of something that we can move towards and strive towards. Um, I just think that those maybe aren't my people,
Yeah, totally.
and
Yeah.
like just not the type of person we'd want to be around.
Yeah.
Although I do get fascinated by those people. And okay, so as we get to know each other, and we probably should stop here soon because we're going well over the normal time, but um, I have this bad habit and you'll probably see it at some point, and we'll probably discuss it after the podcast is done recording, and you and I will laugh about it. But when somebody comes on with extreme beliefs, extremist beliefs, I have a really bad tendency because I'm so interested in those types of people that I don't challenge them at all. And instead, I egg them on. And it leads to me, what I find is a very interesting conversation. But it's not a conversation. It's me egging them on and trying to pull out even stranger and stronger beliefs and
Yeah.
chaos.
Yeah, you're just fucking with them, is what you're doing.
Yeah, actually, yeah, totally.
Wait, okay, so before we go, what was did you do the four tendencies one? Where it was
Um,
like it's like, wait, what are the two different things? It's the four tendencies is the pressure you put on yourself versus meeting expectations for yourself versus meeting expectations for others.
I did do it and it's not, I don't have it open in my tabs anymore. And
Okay.
so it's gone. So I'm sorry.
It's all right. Cut that out. I'll
Yeah.
ask you next time.
What I'm happy is that we're ending the podcast to avoiding the horoscope discussion or the astrology. Yeah, astrology. Astronomy? No, astrology. Yeah.
Astrology. Astronomy? No, astrology.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, come on. It's fun.
I know. I know. It's
It's
always a
hard to
good
be
time.
like, you can't be like, it's hard to be like a scientist and also, research or believe in it, but whatever.
I don't take that perspective, to be completely honest. I just am. I've never read anybody's horoscope that I'm like, regardless of the sign, regardless where I'm not like, yeah, I relate to that. So like that's where I'm like, I just think it's such blanket statements that
Yeah,
it's
for
it's
sure.
hard for me to buy into.
Wait, when is your birthday again? Wait, okay. Well, you have to tell me. I
All
forgot.
right,
What
I
were your
guess here we go.
results?
uh,
but
it,
what was your rising sign?
I think I was a rising Scorpio, wasn't I?
Oh yeah,
Here,
okay, because your birthday was recently,
It's
right?
it's coming up, so it's March 18th, and so
Okay,
I'm a Pisces
Pisces with a
with
Scorpio.
yeah, but I don't
I
know what
don't
that
really
means.
know. I don't really know anything, but you said it. You said it actually fit.
Yeah, but so do they all.
No, they don't. I bet if you go read like a Cancer, you do not like that. Does not resonate with you. Maybe it would. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about it either. I just think it's fun.
Yeah,
Anyways, to sum all this up, the way I feel about personality assessments is that they start a conversation. And if we can have anything that can expand our view on how we see ourselves and how we operate in the world, it's a good thing, you know?
yeah,
So I feel about
and
them
I
all.
I think this was all proof of that. This whole conversation. We talked about assessments. It led, even talking about assessments led to topics. Then we talked about the assessment, the that we're both affirmer styles.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Which led to somehow a conversation about JFK being assassinated and
And alcohol.
alcohol. So it led to a conversation. So I just want to, before we cut out, of just welcome you. I'm so glad to go on this journey with you.
Same. It's gonna
And
be fun.
our goal for anybody who's listening is to now start scheduling guests. We're going to have episodes where it's just Kara and I, and we're going to have these conversations and we'll explore topics. But we're also going to have guests on as well, interesting people that we want to talk to. And we're going to maintain the spirit of the Workplace Wanderer podcast together as we move
Yes.
forward.
It's
So
gonna be great. Happy to be here.
happy to be here. Thank you, everybody, for listening. If you made it this far in the episode at this point, we've officially normed and full circle moment there. And thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please give us a 5 stars on whatever you're listening to. This will also be on YouTube. You can find under the Workplace Wanderer. And hope you have a lovely week.